York City Mayor Eric Adams is under fire. Investigators say the mayor accepted illegal foreign donations from Turkey in an effort to influence the construction of a new Turkish consulate in the city, despite safety concerns. Adams held a press conference after the indictment was unsealed, vowing to stay in office.
My day-to-day will not change. I will continue to do the job for 8.3 million New Yorkers that I was elected to do. It's an unfortunate day, and it's a painful day. But inside of all of that, it's a day where we will finally reveal why for 10 months I have gone through this.
NewsNation Investigative Correspondent Rich McHugh is in New York with the latest on this developing story. Rich?
Hey, Bianca, an absolutely wild 24 hours here in New York City. The first time a sitting mayor of New York City has been charged.
Indictment alleges Mayor Adams engaged in a long-running conspiracy in which he solicited and knowingly accepted illegal campaign contributions from foreign donors and corporations.
Mayor Adams, a former captain in New York City Police, charged with 5 federal crimes: bribery, fraud, soliciting illegal foreign campaign donations, alleging he received bribes from foreign nationals and corporations, illegal campaign contributions, all in exchange for favors with Turkish officials, dating back a decade. Hours after federal agents raided his home, Gracie Mansion, removing his phones, Mayor Adams held a press conference of his own outside, which at times was a bit of a zoo. Take a look.
You sound like Donald Trump. How is this different from what Donald Trump said when he was indicted? How is this different? How is this different?
But make no mistake, Adams was defiant, adamant about his innocence.
And I ask New Yorkers to wait to hear our defense before making any judgments. In about 30 minutes, you're going to hear a story of the case that is in front of us. This story will come from the federal prosecutors. And I ask to wait and hear our side to this narrative.
What's unclear, how this indictment connects to the wider federal probe into his inner circle, a number of whom have resigned recently. The U.S. attorney said this was the beginning. Expect more charges. Adams released a 2.5-minute video overnight implying this may be retaliation for his criticism of how President Biden's administration has handled the migrant crisis.
Despite our pleas, when the federal government did nothing as its broken immigration policies overloaded our shelter system with no relief, I put the people of New York before party and politics.
Now, Mayor Eric Adams has said he has no plans to resign, and what also remains unclear is whether he will ultimately turn himself in, and also whether New York Governor Kathy Hochul will force him out of office, which she has the power to do. Bianca?
Rich McHugh, thanks so much. And speaking of New York City mayors, former Mayor Rudy Giuliani has been disbarred from practicing law in D.C. A local appeals court issued the ruling Thursday on his license, which had been suspended since the summer of 2021. That came after New York suspended his license for spreading lies about the 2020 election while serving as a lawyer for former President Trump. Embattled Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is meeting with leaders on Capitol Hill today, but the visit comes at a tense time between Zelenskyy and the GOP. So what does this mean for the future of U.S. support in Ukraine? To break it down for us, we're joined now by the Hill's national political reporter, Cate Martel. Zelenskyy is ruffling feathers with Republicans after a public spat with former President Trump. And now the party has launched an election meddling investigation, with House Speaker Mike Johnson demanding Zelenskyy fire the Ukrainian ambassador. So, Cate, what exactly was said in this spat with Trump?
Well, this has been a fairly growing spat that has been going on for, I would argue, for months. This has started that former President Trump has said repeatedly at rallies that if he were president, he would end the conflict of Ukraine quickly, even if that meant it was favorable for Moscow and Russia. Now, what escalated particularly in this week, Zelenskyy actually did an interview where he referred to Trump's running mate, Senator J.D. Vance, as too radical. That got under Trump's skin clearly, and then when he had a rally this week, he started going after Zelenskyy, saying that he made some nasty comments about him. This just shows how much things are, escalating on Capitol Hill, and that is why we're not seeing former President Trump meet with Zelenskyy when Zelenskyy is in the U.S. this week.
Well, President Biden recently announced another $8 billion aid package to Ukraine. What do you make of that move, especially since we're so close to the next election? Does that have anything to do with this, do you think?
Yeah, just a casual $8 billion.
Yeah.
Actually, so this $8 billion that President Biden is giving to Ukraine is actually coming from this military stockpile that the Pentagon has that is at risk of expiring at the end of the month on September 30th. So that is where this money has come from.
We got that casual $8 billion
Casual,
from.
yes. And politically, I think this is a pretty smart move, that he is trying to draw a stark contrast between Trump and the President Biden's administration. Trump has kind of carved out himself as this isolationist, more populist potential president. That's compared to the Biden administration, who's arguing that it's really critical to rein in Russia and to help Ukraine as much as we can because of the impacts on NATO. So I think by President Biden making this announcement almost 5.5 weeks until the election is very politically calculated and is meant to help Vice President Harris draw these contrasts between her and former President Trump.
Well, speaking of Vice President Harris, she recently sat down for an interview with MSNBC. She spoke a lot about the economy. What are your biggest takeaways from what she said?
Yeah, we haven't seen Vice President Harris do a ton of interviews. So when she does an interview, it gets a lot of attention. And, you know, most of these appearances that she hasn't really gone in depth on her economic policies. This was the most that I've seen her go in depth and really talk about her economic policies. It was a fairly friendly interview, but she was prodded a bit on what she sees as her economic vision for the country. Now, as to that vision, she talked a lot about potentially having a policy for child tax credits, potentially helping first-time home buyers buy a house with some type of credit, and also helping small businesses with tax deductions. Overall, those are fairly centrist, fairly popular moves, but you know the elephant in the room is that all of these policies require congressional approval. So that all hinges on what happens on election day for the House and the Senate. And if Republicans take control of both of those chambers, that's going to be really hard for her economic policy. But I'm going to be interested to see, does she do more of these interviews? Maybe an interview with a, less of a friendly network for her that, it's kind of the equivalent of former President Trump doing an interview on Fox News. So I'm going to be interested to see, will she continue to do more of these interviews with and without her running mate Tim Walz, and does she delve in more onto her economic policies and more into the weeds instead of more broad strokes?
Yes, she definitely has been hit hard for not doing those interviews. But speaking of Tim Walz, the vice presidential debate is coming up. The race still seems really tight. Do you think this debate could have any significant impact on the race at this point? And I don't know about you, I'm certainly expecting fireworks. I feel like it's going to be pretty intense. What are you anticipating ahead of next week?
Fireworks are a great way to describe that. I am expecting this to be a pretty interesting debate. Now, traditionally, the vice presidential debate doesn't usually move the needle very much, but I actually think that this election might be a little different, particularly if there's not a second debate between Vice President Harris and former President Trump. That puts a lot of attention onto this debate for both sides, particularly for Senator J.D. Vance. Trump had a pretty poor showing in the presidential debate, and there's some lost ground that I think that his campaign is hoping that Vance can bring up and have a stronger night on. Particularly, I would say J.D. Vance has had a fairly rocky rollout since he has become on Trump's ticket, particularly these childless lady comments that I expect will follow him for the rest of his political career. So I am going to be following that. And on the left, I'm also interested to see how much Tim Walz talks about his liberal record. I'm expecting to see him being pushed on that right now the Harris-Walz campaign is really trying to focus their efforts towards the center and bringing in moderate independent voters, particularly in these battleground states. That's what's really going to determine the election. But when you look at their records, they are fairly progressive and fairly liberal. So I'm interested to see for Walz how much he is prodded on his liberal policies and how does he defend them and broaden that into a more potentially centrist administration.
So in the premiere of her new show, former GOP candidate Nikki Haley talked about some of her past comments about former President Trump. What did she have to say about what she said, and what else was of significance in that premiere of Nikki Haley Live?
Yeah, it was fascinating for her, like you said, this premiere of this new SiriusXM show. It really showed me it's not all rainbows and butterflies between her and Trump, that it was a very tense bitter, bruising primary season, and she's not over it. She has endorsed former President Trump, and the most interesting part for that interview, she acknowledged that. She said, I'm not going to defend everything that Trump has done. I still have my criticisms of him. I'm not going to necessarily be glowing when I talk about him. But at the same time, the reason that she says that she will still endorse and vote for Trump in November, is that she says that she doesn't have a thin skin when it comes to politics, and that she's trying to look through the lens from a voter, which administration she thinks would have a better vision for the country, and trying to put out of her mind some of the comments that Trump made about her and her husband and his deployment last winter. Overall, I think it's going to be fascinating to see how much does she hold true to that, particularly because it is such a close election and we are so close to November. For her to have such a platform, she's showing us that she still has these critiques of Trump. She has not necessarily forgotten and forgiven everything he said, but she's trying to put that aside and focus, I think, on the end goal of November.
Yeah, and I think it will be interesting to see if he wins, if her tone changes at all.
Definitely.
In her new show. But back on Capitol Hill, lawmakers are heading home after passing a bill to avoid a shutdown, and Republicans are feeling really confident that they'll be in full control of Washington next year. Listen.
Our team is going to win in November. I'm very confident about this. I believe we're going to keep and grow the House majority, win the Senate, and win the White House as well, and we're going to put Donald Trump back in the office.
So what legislation do Republicans sort of have as their top priorities if their dreams come true and they get the House, the Senate, and the White House?
If their dreams come true. Well, Speaker Mike Johnson already has his game plan that if that is the case, they are ready to roll with everything that they want to put through. Now, what are these policies? They want to work on tax policy. They want to eliminate some of the green initiatives that Democrats have put into place. I think that immigration will be a big priority for Republicans on Capitol Hill. If you remember a few months ago, Republicans did not vote in favor of a border bill. It was bipartisan at the time, but behind the scenes, former President Trump was trying to block it because they were hoping to get something even stronger further. So I expect that that will be something that will be a big priority for Republicans, as well as reining in the debt. That's been one of the big issues when we've been talking about this government funding fight that has now been punted until mid-December. Now, Speaker Mike Johnson and some Republicans had been hoping to fund the government actually for 6 months to bring them to next year. That's because they were hoping they could really have control of the White House, the House, and the Senate, and they could possibly rein in some of the budgetary concerns that they've had over the past few years. That did not obviously come through, and now we will be having this funding fight in the middle of December, possibly during lame duck. So I think that's going to be interesting to see how that potentially plays out, because that can be a totally different scenario. We don't know what lame duck will look like and how strong that will be based on Speaker Mike Johnson's plans.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they're able to manifest their dreams. But there's also a lot to get to before the end of the year, like the Farm Bill and the Defense Authorization Bill. Are they on track to get all of that done? Because there's a lot to do, and I mean, the year's almost up. I can't believe I'm saying that, but time is ticking.
Yeah, there's a lot to do, and December 20th is actually the date that the government funding now goes until. That's the extension, and that is 5 days before Christmas. They do have a lot of work to do, and I think it's going to entirely dependent on what happens in November. If we are looking at a lame duck period where Republicans are going to take control of both chambers potentially in January, that can, I think, really affect how this goes. That means that Democrats will be willing to hold things up because that's kind of their last chance to pass things through. I think it's going to be interesting to see, I think, particularly how that plays out. Like you mentioned, the Farm Bill, there's always, and the Defense Funding Bill, there are always holdups that go along with this. Not to mention, whatever goes on with this government funding deal at the end of the year, that's lawmakers' opportunities to throw in all of the packages and all of the bills that they've been working on for the past year. That's their big moment to try to get them in, and that always causes crazy headaches on Capitol Hill, and there's always a lot of drama. So I expect on December 19th, we will be having a similar conversation.
Yeah, some more chaos to come. On the other side of the aisle, Senate Democrats are already starting to put together legislation believing Harris will win this November. There are senators working on the Democratic version of the child tax credit and a bill to raise small business tax breaks to $50,000. Do you think any of this legislation is influenced by the fact that the Senate Democrats think they won't win a majority? Or do you think this is something that they would genuinely try to push if Vice President Harris wins in November?
I think these are very politically calculated policies to be highlighting and hoping that they could accomplish in the next Congress if they can continue to hold control of the Senate. Child tax credits, that's fairly popular broadly. That's something that now that lawmakers have left Washington or back in the campaign trail, that's something I expect them to continue talking about. Now, we have to be realistic, though. When you look at the Hill and Decision Desk's election forecasts, those models show that Republicans have a 71% chance of holding on to, or of taking the Senate. That's not something that I think will necessarily, that the odds of Democrats keeping the Senate are fairly low, that yes, they have these plans, and yes, they're hoping that they can push them through, but it's all tied into whatever happens and what chambers end up going in what direction come November, that some of these policies that they're putting forward, yes, I think these are policies that Democrats actually want to put forward regardless, but they're being very politically calculated in trying to emphasize policies that are more moderate, more popular, and things that they can potentially run on.
So they're easy to get people from both sides of the aisle, but it doesn't matter because no one is expecting them to win the majority.
Absolutely. It's possible.
Yeah.
It's possible they can win the majority.
It's possible, but right now the numbers show that it probably is
71% chance by our model.
Okay, yeah.
So
we'll see where we're at next week.
Well, that's why Schumer tried to get lawmakers out of town so quickly so that they can have all this time to campaign. That shows me that Schumer thinks there's a chance. If he kept them in Congress longer, that would have shown me that he didn't think they had much of a chance.
That's true. We'll have to see what happens. Cate Martel, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Every minute that goes by brings us closer to having conditions that are going to be simply too dangerous to navigate. But if you are in the northern part of the state and you have access and you're in an evacuation zone and you've been told to evacuate, you do have time to do it now, so do it.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis urging residents to evacuate as Hurricane Helene barrels toward the Gulf Coast of the state. The National Hurricane Center has officially upgraded Helene to a Category 2 storm, but forecasters say it will likely grow in strength before making landfall later tonight. Residents in Florida and Georgia are bracing for a possible Category 3 or 4 hurricane. Officials are warning of winds up to 130 miles per hour and potentially catastrophic and unsurvivable storm surges, as high as 20 feet in Appalachia Bay near Tallahassee. Right now, Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina are all under a state of emergency.
Put out a statement for a 21-day ceasefire along the Israeli-Lebanese border. We were able to generate significant support from Europe as well as the Arab nations. It's important this war not widen.
President Biden speaking yesterday on the way back from New York Wednesday night. That joint statement issued by the U.S., France, and other allies called the recent fighting in Lebanon intolerable and said it presents an unacceptable risk of escalation across the region. It comes as the Israeli military confirmed it carried out another strike Thursday morning south of Beirut. According to the Lebanese health ministry, 2 were killed in that strike and 15 others were wounded. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office said Thursday morning that there had been no directive to ease the fighting on Israel's northern border with Lebanon. In the meantime, Hezbollah has not responded to the international calls for a ceasefire. And former President Trump's legal team will be back in court Thursday to appeal the $464 million judgment against him in the New York civil fraud case. That decision, handed down in February of this year, ruled that Trump and his organization had conspired to alter his net worth to reap tax and insurance benefits. Trump's attorneys are asking a panel of judges to throw out the decision, saying that Trump's business deals resulted in no victims and no losses. A decision on the appeal is not expected before the November election. And a California man has been charged in connection to an explosion at the Santa Maria courthouse Wednesday that injured 5 people. Police say 20-year-old Nathaniel McGuire was set to be arraigned yesterday for a firearms violation. They say when he arrived, he threw a backpack at the screening station that then exploded in the hallway. He was caught by officers outside the courthouse. According to officials, McGuire was wearing body armor under his jacket and not injured in the explosion. They say his motivation appeared to be linked to his gun violation charges. McGuire is now charged with attempted murder. All 5 people that were injured in the explosion have been released from the hospital. Senate Democrats are funneling cash into Florida and Texas to try to flip two long-held Republican seats. The Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee's multi-million-dollar television ad buy is targeting Florida Senator Rick Scott and Texas Senator Ted Cruz. The DSCC did not say exactly how much it would spend, but the move came as a surprise to some in the party, as the Democrats need to defend their seats in 5 swing states in order to maintain their majority in the chamber. In the meantime, Texas Democratic candidate Colin Allred welcomed the extra support, saying it would help build momentum as he tries to unseat Cruz. In the meantime, new polling shows Senator Cruz has a comfortable lead over Allred. According to a new Emerson College The Hill Next Star poll, both gained a point in the last couple weeks, but Cruz has kept his 4-point lead, now 49% support across the Lone Star State. To break the numbers down for us, we're bringing in Senior Director of Emerson College Polling, Matt Taglia. Matt, thanks for joining us. Allred may be trailing at the moment, but your new poll shows 6% of voters are still undecided, and Cruz has a 50% unfavorable rating. Do you think Allred has a chance to flip this seat?
Well, possibly. So, as you said, this is just a 4-point race with Cruz at 49, Allred at 45. So these results are within the margin of error for this poll. Both have gained a point since earlier in September. So, Cruz is a known commodity here. 42% have a very unfavorable opinion of him, however, whereas 15% aren't that familiar with Allred. So there is room for growth there, but it's getting a little late in the game. However, independents are breaking for Allred currently with 52%. I think there is probably some room there for Cruz, and a good chance that Cruz could catch up to Trump's top line number if he can improve those numbers with independents. But if independents hold for Allred, then this could be a very competitive race. I think it could very potentially go either way. But right now, the preponderance of evidence is on Cruz's side.
Yeah, and like you said, it feels sort of late. But according to your poll, immigration is the #1 issue for Texas voters. And Vice President Harris appears to be trying to close the gap between her and former President Trump in the border states. And her campaign has planned a visit to the U.S.-Mexico border in Arizona this week. So is the vice president's focus on immigration heading into October moving the needle at all in Texas?
Well, I think the top line numbers don't lie here. Trump is up a point compared to where he was earlier this month, whereas Harris's top line number hasn't really moved. So as you said, immigration is the top issue for voters in Texas. About a third of the electorate say it's their top issue. That's overwhelmingly true for Republicans, with 53% of the electorate. Less so for independents, but still 24%. And then among these folks who say that immigration is their top issue, only 12% say that they're backing Vice President Harris. Earlier this month, she was winning 8% of those voters. So, that changes within the margin of error. It's certainly the direction I would want to see if I'm on the Harris campaign, but is it enough to move the needle? It doesn't necessarily look like it based on that top line number. We'll see in the next few weeks whether those numbers change as a result of her policies and actions on immigration.
All right, switching gears here a little bit, Emerson Polling also released a survey of Virginia voters this week, and it shows Vice President Harris with an 8-point lead over former President Trump. In the meantime, Senator Tim Kaine holds a 10-point lead over his Republican challenger. And it was just a few years ago that Virginia voters elected a Republican to the governor's mansion. So what's changed since 2021?
That's right. And I think we're seeing a bit of a reversion to what we expect to see in Virginia at the statewide level. 2021 was kind of weird, for lack of a better term. We had COVID lockdowns, there were school closures. Some of these things were deeply unpopular. And so Republicans were fired up. Independents ended up breaking for Youngkin based on exit polling. And the Biden administration was not terribly popular. And you don't necessarily want to follow the president's footsteps into the next election, if it's in a midterm or off year. So, now we see that independents are breaking for Kaine by about 7 points. That's exactly what I would want to see if I'm the Democratic candidate. Maybe a little bit more buffer, even, frankly, in Virginia. But, he's obviously a well-known and reasonably well-liked incumbent. So it's going to be tough for Cal to compete here. Even in some of the more competitive states, we see that support for Trump doesn't necessarily translate to Republican Senate candidates a little bit further down the ballot. So, you can see that this is tough odds for any Republican candidate at the statewide level if you're in a competitive state. And Virginia right now just isn't looking terribly competitive.
Senior Director of Emerson College Polling, Matt Taglia, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Hoda Kotb is leaving the Today Show. She became co-anchor of NBC's flagship program after Matt Lauer was fired for sexual assault, though she's been with the network for 26 years. During the show Thursday morning, she said she'll leave early next year and cited wanting more time with her kids as the driver behind her decision. That's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Bianca Facchinei. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel. And come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.